3, Golden Black Live. You're left with me, but actually we're left with one of our favorite guests, and a great opportunity to have some of the stature of Seth Davis on our show. And Seth, welcome to the show. Thank you for your patience. We're glad to have you here.
Hey, it's my honor to be here. A show of this stature. So, Alan, thank you.
There you go.
And thank you for inviting me on. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
And I love your Twitter feed. I appreciate knowing a little about you and your approach to life in general. I appreciate very much. We may hit a little bit of that, but college basketball also keeps you busy, and it's every year is an interesting year. This one, I thought one of the pieces you wrote a couple weeks ago about the fact that road teams were winning more than usual this year was interesting, but an interesting perspective. Is there a way to look at this season right now as it stands and say this season is going to be remembered for X? How would you say that?
Scoring,
Yeah.
and this is something that is come about as an evolution, and really, I think hit a tipping point a couple of years ago when scoring was at its lowest level, I think since 1952.
Right.
The tempo had slowed down, and just visually, as somebody who has the great privilege of having to watch a lot of college basketball as part of my job, I could see the game slowing down in comparison with what was happening not only in the NBA but international basketball, and give the NCAA and the Rules Committee credit for putting in some fixes in the way the game was shortening the shot clock and the way the game's been officiated to bring back freedom of movement. And what I could not have anticipated, I guess maybe I have anticipated it generally been out this quickly, is how quickly the coaches would adapt to this and really push the envelope. Say, okay, these are the rules. This is where the game is going. We need smaller players. We need more shooters. We need better athletes. We need to open things up. We need to play smaller lineups. You're seeing these 3 and 4 guard lineups. Teams like Kansas and Virginia, Villanova has been doing it for a long time, and it's just a more aesthetically pleasing game. And I think then when you combine that with what has been a long-standing pressure applied by the tournament selection committee on the non-conference strength of schedule, so the teams have to play each other. So you have these great games like the Kentucky-North Carolina game that ended, I think, 103-100 in regulation. So it's been a great. I tell people, especially football fans, everyone's getting psyched for the Super Bowl. Like, if you wait till March to start watching college basketball, then you're a damn fool, because this has been a heck of a season, night after night.
Yeah, it has been. And, even as what I would call a defensive-oriented coach in Matt Painter, Purdue is scoring in numbers that you haven't seen here in a while. And the overriding comment has been, though Purdue's had a couple of disappointments, certainly, but this is a lot of fun, just fun basketball to watch. There's great movement. There's things happening everywhere you turn, and it's Purdue, but it's the opponent. It's just quality from that standpoint.
Well, Purdue, and I hope I'm not damning Matt and the program with faint praise here, but I mean, Purdue to me is maybe the best example anywhere. I think Cincinnati might be the other one that comes to mind. Of a program that was always predicated on playing great defense, and they still play great defense, but also managing pace in a way that is just impossible to do. And, when you're talking about a Purdue team that's I think second now in the country in three-point percentage. They've been, firing away threes all season long and, scoring a lot of points. And I want to say it was the Notre Dame game where they had to get up to the 80s to beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame's been playing this way for a long time. And so Purdue is a great example of a program that plays now and looks now different than it did just a few years ago. And I think most people would look at the way that Purdue's playing right now versus the way it played a few years ago and say, boy, I'd rather watch the way they're playing now.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. As I said, the watchability quotient has been very, very high here in West Lafayette. Purdue specifically, and I don't know how much you've had a chance to see Purdue, but yet this is a team that's very interesting. I mean, you've got a couple big guys, but you've seen Matt Painter actually go away from that. I mean, the time that Swanigan and Haas have spent on the court at the same time, I don't have it charted, but it's lowered over time, and yet and you're playing a kind of those 6'5" guys. I know you have Vincent Edwards a little bit longer. What's your impressions of Purdue? And we all talk about the ceiling here. Is that real in your eyes?
Well, I think Purdue's a Final Four caliber team, and obviously there's more than 4 teams that are capable of getting there. But if we're making Purdue to me is going to be on a relatively short list. And it's interesting, what you say about Isaac Haas and him and Swanigan. And I've been watching this now for a couple of years, and having done a couple other games in person for Big Ten Network. I thought it was difficult for those two guys to play together even last year, and now, even though Swanigan has, greatly improved his perimeter game and can really step out with his shooting and his passing, it's still hard to play the two of them together, again, because of the way the game is playing. And I think, early in the season, of course, Alan, you're a lot closer to this than me, so, you have more chapter and verse on this, but, it seemed to me that Edwards in particular was really struggling and not playing well. And then now here over the last 6 weeks or so, he has really woken up and become a lot more comfortable. And I see his three-point shooting is really elevated. And that's just a great development, because he, besides being a great scorer, he's also, he and Matthias, I think, are their most versatile defenders. So, that's a challenge for someone like Isaac Haas, not only, crowding Swanigan's space, but also, the game is so ball screen heavy and pick and roll heavy that the most important thing that a big player needs to be able to do is play ball screen down on the perimeter. And if you can't do that, then you're going to have a hard time, getting a whole lot of minutes.
Maryland, Purdue's opponent tomorrow, really a big game, at least in the Big Ten world. 17th ranked Terrapins taking on 23rd ranked Purdue. Have you seen much of Maryland this year? And they've been a surprise, obviously, to some extent, because they had heavy graduation losses and from last year of guys that left the program for one reason or another. But this is a very interesting team as well. Should be a great game tomorrow in College Park.
Yeah, that's something that everybody's. It's really one of them. I think there may be only 2 games tomorrow between ranked teams, and that's one of them, and Kentucky, Florida being the other one. So I'm very excited for that game. I'm like I say, for Maryland and Maryland fans, they've been saying, well, we're not really getting any respect, and it's really kind of an odd profile. I mean, here they are, they're 20-2 overall, they're 8-1 in the Big Ten, and yet they only have 2 wins against teams ranked in the top 50 of the RPI. And so they've actually played a decent schedule. Maybe you play teams like Richmond, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Georgetown. These are not automatic wins by any stretch, but they're not super hard either. And most of them were either home or neutral court. So this is a game where we can now. Winning at Minnesota is not easy. I give them credit, but even though it's at home. You got a team like Purdue, and everybody's watching to see. And, listen, I give him a lot of credit, Mark Turgeon, a lot of credit. He's got 3 freshmen in the starting lineup. Obviously, a very, very good college point guard in Melo Trimble, so he's got some nice pieces. But you got 3 freshmen. You expect at some point for them to stub their toe and lose a game that they, quote-unquote, should not lose. And they really haven't done that. And I think there's at a certain point, here we are in February, you look at their schedule, see all those W's, man. You got to tip your hat. There's something to be said for winning and winning and winning and winning and winning. Again, with 3 freshmen in the starting lineup. Yeah,
no question. I mean, I think they were very impressive with their wins at Minnesota and at Ohio State. They just flat took care of business. I understand Ohio State has its issues, but this is an Ohio State team that took Purdue to the final buzzer, and Purdue was fortunate to get out of Columbus with a win. And this is a very, very and I haven't watched a ton of Maryland, but we'll be. It's going to be a fascinating matchup because again, Purdue's inside presence should be in a position to do well, but a different environment. Though I don't sense that Purdue will be too have any issues with that, but it's going to be an interesting game there from that standpoint. Where are you? Are you now? Take us through, because I think I asked you this last time. This week, are you typically traveling on weekends or before the tournament, or what's your week-to-week schedule typically on game?
I am officially a studio boy now.
Yeah.
So at the time of year, I'm really locked in and gearing up for the tournament. And of course, a week from tomorrow we have this mid-season bracket show, which we're doing with the committee, which I'm really looking forward to doing. But I'm blessed to be able to live in sunny Los Angeles, California. Though right now here it's raining back home. I just talked to my wife.
Yeah.
But, the CBS studios are in New York City, so my typical schedule is I take the Wednesday night red eye to New York, and I work at the CBS Sports Network studios on Thursday nights, and then tomorrow I'll be in the CBS studio for our day game is Duke Pittsburgh, and then I work on the cable side throughout the evening, and then back at CBS on Sunday, and we just keep doing it till we have a national champion, man. I haven't worked a day in my life, Alan. You know that better than anybody. So
yeah, that's a great way.
Great fun time of year.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is that, and it is fun to see how this all will whittle down. Last time I think we had you on, we talked about your book, which I really liked, the John Wooden book, and Gordon, if you get a chance, throw that back up there. And A Coach's Life, the name of the book. If you haven't read it, and it's the thing I liked most about it was John Wooden has been deified, I guess, if that's the term, and rightly so in a lot of ways, but almost to a legendary status. But I thought this was an honest, just a straightforward look at every person on this earth has some flaws. This didn't focus on his flaws, but it brought out some of the decisions and things he had to face in his life. Now looking back at it, it's been out for 3 years now. What kind of response have you had and from the book and from people that have read it and enjoyed it or commented on it?
Well, it's been very gratifying, and I appreciate those kind words from you. And listen, I spent 4.5 years of my life on the project, and I just wanted to present John Wooden, in all of his multi-hued colors. Like you said, we're all human, we're all flawed. Some of us have a lot more flaws than others.
Yeah.
And as I say, John Wooden wasn't perfect. He was just a lot closer than most people. But,
no doubt.
He had his rough edges, and he was a tough competitor, and he had to make certain compromises. And then it was interesting, kind of peeling that onion. As the saying goes, as we get older, our stories get better.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting to sort of go back and not only my own interviews with him, but all of the many, many, many interviews that he gave about his life and his career, and then go back in time and kind of recreate through primary source reporting and interviews the truth and find those gaps between what actually happened and what he said happened. Some of it was just foggy memory, some of it was sort of different perspectives, some of it was just flat out lying, frankly. But he was a complicated man, but he was a great man and a very decent man to his core. And, as I tell people, and one of the really gratifying things, Alan, is, a lot of coaches, especially a lot of college basketball coaches, read that book.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the world that I live in, when I reach out to people or I go to games, people who I don't, I may know a little bit or I may have heard about, but I don't really know, have made a point to come up to me and tell me that they read the book and enjoyed the book. When I hear people telling me, as several people have, that, for example, Jay Wright has recommended the book to them. You can't get, better than Jay Wright. When Rick Pitino calls me out of the blue and tells me that he read the book and how much he enjoyed it and how much he wanted to pick my brain and ask me a lot of really interesting questions. So that part of it has just been great karma, which, given the pain that goes into writing a book, and I'm sitting here today working on another book, there's a lot of pain, a lot of loneliness, a lot of insecurity, a lot of self-doubt. When people tell you that they read it, took the time to read it and liked it, and then take the time to tell you that, it's really nice.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that is a true statement. Having had a little of that experience myself, it is definitely that. You have, we have a couple questions for you, but I wanted to, you touched on what is, because I was going to ask you, what is your next, you have another book project? And I probably should have done a better research, but what is it?
I do. It's kind of an author's code not to go too far into it. So it's not much of a departure from the books that I've done. And if all goes well, and sometimes all does not go well, but maybe January, maybe 1 year from today, we'll be having a conversation as part of my book promotion, which is another lonely, pathetic slog. Because once you're done writing it, the work really begins when you're trying to sell it. That's the real hard part.
But it is a book on college basketball or some part of college basketball. That's a fair statement.
I would say it's a sports book.
Okay, gotcha.
I would say it's a sports book. We'll tease your millions of listeners with that.
And
one.
there are millions, I promise you. That part's good. One question we've had several here, but I wanted to ask about, just because your show, you're gonna do the kind of, and this is not fair, but it's a little bit like what college football has done, obviously, with its leading up. But you're only going to do this. February 11th is your show. You're gonna list the top 16 at that point, correct? But is that,
yes.
that's the only time that's going to happen before Selection Sunday? Is that correct, or do you have one in between?
No, that's correct, and you don't have to make any apologize about saying that this is a copycat of what football did, because if football wasn't doing it, then I just don't think it would have ever occurred to the committee to want to do this. And this actually came out of a suggestion from coaches. That the NABC put together this panel of coaches to kind of come up with ideas to improve the process, and they liked what college football did, because they felt like they always want to learn more. They want to know what's in the secret sauce, and it's a hard question to answer because it's different for each committee member. But they just want to know, hey, where do we stand? What do we need to know? How exactly are you guys making these decisions? So the committee kind of ran with that and approached my people at CBS. And listen, I wish they were doing an entire bracket, but I understand, because if it's going to be the official one, there's a lot more pressure to get it right than the ones that we see, the 25 different versions on the internet. And when they do their bracket the week of selection, they're working basically around the clock for 5 days. Yeah. And to ask, these 10 people who are volunteers who have real day jobs to get together and spend 5 days doing a whole bracket, a little bit much. And there's so much happens day to day, to keep doing this and updating it, I also think would be pretty prohibitive. So it'll be a one-shot deal Saturday after the Super Bowl. Get everybody excited, get everybody talking. Just a sneak peek to get everybody sort of get their mind right for the tournament, which is clearly the greatest sporting event in the history of mankind.
I suppose if Purdue can beat beat Maryland, maybe beat Indiana, maybe Purdue can sneak into that top 16. They got a ways to go, obviously, at least from the AP standpoint, ranked 23rd. And that's one of the things, because most of our questions are external. Why is Purdue ranked 23rd and Wisconsin's ranked such and such? Because they haven't beaten anybody. That's the kind of discussion that you want to have as you lead into the tournament anyway. I think it's good for basketball. I did want to ask one question before I let you go. I do.
Yes.
The fact that in these times that we're living in, and we're not going to be making rampant political statements, but I do appreciate the fact that you're willing to express your opinion. An educated one, most definitely, and one that maybe I tend to agree with, but I definitely agree with your willingness and importance to stand out. And yet you've had some critics. Some people have said, stay in your lane, Seth, talk about college basketball. I think it's bigger than that. I would tend to think you agree.
I do, and I appreciate you saying that, and I've actually gotten more feedback along the lines of what you just said than people saying, hey, stick to sports. I mean, it's when people tell you to stick to sports, what they're actually telling you is I disagree with your politics. Yeah. Which is fine. And when people say, hey, thanks for using your platform to speak out, they're usually saying I agree with your politics. I certainly don't think what I'm doing and have done is heroic by any stretch. I do believe that I bring a level of expertise to this that, frankly, a lot of quote unquote experts may not really have. And I come from a political family. My father went to law school with Hillary Clinton and went to Yale, both with Bill Clinton and George W. Bush. And is a longtime Democrat and worked in the Clinton White House. But and is now often on Fox News and other news channels. But my father really prides himself on not on being civil and being able to disagree without being disagreeable, and not demonizing people they disagree with. And so I'm trying to bring that to Twitter. I'm sure that I fail on a lot of respects because I'm very angry and passionate. And I will say this, I've always been politically inclined and politically involved, but I've never thought about using my sports and Twitter platform to advance my beliefs because I've never felt that I had to. And I truly believe that the things I'm trying to speak out on are not about politics. They're about the way that we treat each other. Yeah. They're about our values as Americans, embracing our diversity. I believe we can be a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws. And I believe that we're entitled to our own opinions, but we're not entitled to our own facts. Yeah. And I'm just trying to get everybody on to adhere to those principles, left and right. I was encouraging people at the March for Life march in Washington to send me pictures of their experience that I could retweet and support them and praise them for their civic engagement. I am devoutly pro-choice. I don't believe in the policy position they were representing, but I love the fact that they were engaged citizens embarking on peaceful protest. I think we need more of that, not less of that, and to the degree in my own little way my own little corner of the world that I can help make that happen, create that space for people to express themselves in a civil manner, that's what I'm trying to do. That's all I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and I think that comes out, but not everybody wants to hear it that way. But I'm with you. I think that's the thing. My biggest feeling and all that is can't we find a way to talk to one another, and let's hope.
Right.
We have
so much more. We have so much more in common.
Yeah.
Than we have that's different. And if we just learn to emphasize that commonality, because we're both in the media, the cable channels they don't emphasize commonality. They're selling fear. They're selling conflict. That's how that moves in the. I don't blame them. Yeah. That's what people want. That's what people want to watch. So that means we need to work doubly hard to combat that. So that's what I'm trying to do.
All right. Well, we're going to let you get back to your working life. We'll be watching this weekend, and thanks so much for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
Alan, great talking to you, and I hope everyone enjoys it. Good luck to the Boilers in College Park.
All right, sounds great. Thanks so much, and we'll talk
Bye-bye.
down the road before long. All right.
You got it.
I want to thank Gordon and Allie, and of course Cammie as well for staying a little over time today. We appreciate that as well. I want to also thank our sponsors, Triple X on the Hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. Basham Reynolds and John Basham, the good folks that have been supporters of our program. Hilton Garden Inn, Christy Kuntz, when tomorrow's a big day. State HDI tonight. State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com. About as big a Purdue sports fan as you're going to get. Thanks to our guests. Certainly enjoyed them all today. Michael Wood, Robert Sampson, and Seth Davis, and we very much appreciate the opportunity to have each of them on. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Another Boilermaker legend will join us, David Bodiah. That will be a privilege to have him on next week. In addition, we'll probably have one of the Purdue's new assistants in football, too. We'll look forward to that as well. All right, have a great week, everybody. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you next week on Gold and Black Live.